Should you play Fire Emblem 3 Houses on the Nintendo Switch? The short answer is yes, especially if you like tactical RPGs, waifus, story-driven games, Hogwarts, and fishing. If you want to know more, stick around till the end of the video. Fire Emblem 3 Houses has quickly become one of my favorite games on the Nintendo Switch. It is my second most played game after Splatoon 2, as in I've spent more time playing this game than I have Breath of the Wild, and that's saying something. The premise of 3 Houses is simple. You are a mercenary turned teacher.
Hello, Professor.
I guess you don't need a PhD in this game. You are a mercenary turned professor at the prestigious Officers Academy at Garreg-Mach Monastery. And since you're the new guy or gal, you get to pick which of the 3 houses you'd like to teach. If you thought picking a starter Pokemon was hard, boy do I have news for you. But more on that later. You spend most of the game exploring the monastery and leading your class into battle. If you choose to explore the monastery, you get to walk around and interact with all the students, faculty, and random NPCs to learn more about the game's lore, deepen your connections, and do side quests to earn renown. There's a lot of activities to raise your professor level and help you acquire items or stat boosts like gardening, fishing, sharing meals, cooking, singing, fishing, monthly tournaments, finding random items, having tea with your waifu, making the faculty train you in their specialty. Just don't ask why the Archbishop specializes in punching. Did I mention fishing? The gameplay for this section is all about walking around and doing tasks to prepare you for the other parts of the game. For example, sharing a meal or delivering lost items and gifts help boost your students' motivation, which impacts how much you can instruct them later on during the teaching sections. Cooking will grant you a stat boost in battle for the rest of the month. You can spend the renown you earn from side quests to fix up the saint statues, which give you an experience boost and learning boost. Some of these activities cost you activity points, and most of them will help boost your professor level, which in turn gives you even more activity points on future exploration days. The beauty of the Explore option is that most of the actions and activities are completely optional. Say you don't like the fishing mechanic, then you don't gotta fish. Maybe you want to use up your activity points to farm support levels between your students. Or maybe you want to shove gifts at the hottie in the other house so that you can recruit her as soon as possible. Or perhaps you want your characters to ride a horse or a wyvern. Then you can use up your points to get faculty training in those skills. There is no time limit for exploring, and what you do depends on how you choose to experience the game. However, there are a few functions that are limited to the Explore option. It's one of the few times where you can view support conversations between your students. It is the only time where you can use your renown. And most importantly, it is the only time you can talk to the best NPC in all of video game history.
Greetings, Professor. Nothing to report.
After a free day, you'll typically have an instructional day, which is a very common but short section of the game. Here you can instruct your students in various skills, set goals for each of the students, and send them off on a group project that will boost their support and skills in one of the 3 areas that most new players ignore till later in the game. The amount of students you can teach depends on your professor level, which you can increase when exploring the monastery. And how much you can teach a student depends on how much motivation they have, which you can boost by giving them gifts or food when exploring. Who wouldn't be motivated to learn after that? The teaching section can be automated and skipped, but it is the only section of the game where you can actively prepare your students for class upgrades in the future. As a small aside, the game has different unit classes that a character can become through certification exams. Different classes require different proficiencies and skills and have unique characteristics. Some can fly, others can use magic, and others can steal items from their enemies. Using the teaching section of the game, you can select whichever class you want each student to work towards. So if you want to make Edelgard into a Dark Magician girl, you can. As far as the RPG part of this game goes, this is where you have the most control on what role each of your characters play. Apart from exploring and teaching, there's the battle system, where you can choose to complete side quests, grind for levels and items, or play through the limited time paralogs for unique items and even more story. Battles are the main mechanic of the game, and while most of the explorational activities are optional, there is a required battle at the end of each month which you have to complete in order to progress through the story. The battle system feels a lot like a combination of RPGs and chess. You have units of different classes that have different movement capabilities, and each has their own stats and roles. For example, the armored guys are basically immune to arrows, but are very weak to magic attacks. And just like chess, the main objective of the battles is to defeat the enemy commander for story battles, or to just defeat all the enemies on the map. You move your characters along in a grid format, however you can choose how to view the board. There's the classic looking down on everyone, or you may like a nice slight tilt, or just zoom in all the way and play as if you're in an actual 3D landscape. Apart from the direct attacks, you can use gambits, which are a special attack that can be only used a few times per battle, where you attack with the army led by the unit instead of the unit themselves. Each attack sequence is fully animated and skippable, so if you get tired of watching them, you just push the B button. And if you're playing in classic mode where the death of a character is permanent, the game gives you a nice Ctrl Z option so that you can change your approach to the battle and prevent the enemy from taking away your waifu. I'll admit, some of the mechanics of this game can come off as very grindy. It is an RPG after all. However, what I really love about Three Houses is that the game rewards your efforts with story, rather than a simple, you gain 3 attack. Units fighting or dining along each other often gain support, and you can view their support conversation during each exploration session. Some of them are silly and fun, others are very wholesome and heartwarming, but most importantly, many of them reveal information about the game's lore that you couldn't get otherwise. Speaking of story, remember how I mentioned that the choice of which house to teach was harder than picking a starter Pokemon? Yeah, that's because each of the houses has their own unique storyline, except for Edelgard's, which has 2. There you'll learn about each house leader's motivations, background, and goals. There's so much lore and mystery in this game that as soon as I finished my first playthrough of it, I jumped straight into New Game Plus without hesitation and was eager to see what the story of the other houses would hold. Needless to say, if you love story-driven games, you'll love Three Houses. Now before I continue praising this game, I think it's time to mention some of the issues it has. This is not an online focused game. There is an online option where you get information on what other players chose to do, explore, battle, or rest, and it gives you 4 characters in the monastery that sell you items at a cheaper price, and they have this weird Mario Odyssey Balloon World hide and seek option. It also adds EXP boosts and free items to each battle you do, making it easier to find free weapons and level up. But that's it, there is no online battle option for now. And to be frank, I'm not sure if there ever will be, so if you're looking for a game where you can play online against others, for now, this ain't it. Another major drawback of Three Houses is that the first half of the story is the same for each house. During my first run, I noticed some of the students from the other houses talking about how they had some different monthly mission. And boy was I disappointed when I started a new game and found out that it's the same battles as in my first playthrough. This is only for the first half of each of the 4 stories, and yes, they do have different cutscenes and interactions due to having different house leaders involved, but the overall introductory chapters of the game started to feel a bit bland, especially when you're doing them for the 4th time. Of course, since you are going through the game with a different set of characters, you have their support conversations to keep you going. But having the exact same battles and storyline during the first half of the game felt a bit like a huge missed opportunity for the devs. The last potential problem that you may have with this game is the difficulty. The explore and teach segments don't get any harder than they already are, so the only difficulty options you have are for battles. For now, there's only 2 difficulty options, but more will be added soon. However, all ramping up the difficulty does is increase the levels and stats of the enemies during battle. That means you have to be a lot more deliberate with your teaching and battle tactics, and you may have to focus on grinding a bit more, which to be honest sounds a lot like more work rather than a bigger challenge. But since the game gives you so much leeway in how you choose to play it, instead of tinkering with the difficulty settings, you can have self-imposed challenges like only teaching students in their weak areas or using a select number or specific characters for your run of the game. Now that we got the bad stuff out of the way, let's talk about where this game excels. It is very clear that the devs threw a lot of time and resources at making this game. Okay, ignore the Pokemon quality fruit stands. Each line of dialogue in this game is fully voiced. Apart from the cutscenes, which you'd expect to be voiced anyways, you'll hear characters talk during exploration, teaching, battles, support lines, tea time, you name it. Anytime a character is talking, either amongst themselves or with you, NPC or playable, they have a voice. That doesn't happen in RPGs. It makes the game feel very immersive and does wonders with establishing the lore and developing all the characters. Speaking of which, this game is chock full of lovable characters, but I can't geek out about them without spoiling their arcs, so just know you can marry your waifu, but good luck picking which one that's gonna be. It's also really nice to see some of the voice actors being very actively engaged in the community, like Joe Zieja, who voiced Claude, the leader of the Golden Deer. And better be staying hydrated, 6 to 8 cups of water a day, Joe. Overall, I'd say that Fire Emblem Three Houses is one of the best games out on the Nintendo Switch. It'll likely take you over 200 hours to complete all 4 stories, and you can choose how to approach the game. The majority of the game's activities are completely optional, and it rewards you handsomely with story elements for completing tasks that would have felt like grinding. There's tons of lovable characters and mysteries to solve. So should you play Fire Emblem Three Houses? The choice is yours. If you have any questions or comments about the game, please let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Also, what other games would you like to hear me review? Thanks for watching, and nothing to report.